Croeso, hello, welcome to Rob, Ryan, Red, the Wrexham podcast, brought to you with Red 10 People Development. No game gave us plenty of pain. Wrexham's match called off because of the rain. But still, there was plenty to gain. Wrexham remain firmly in the promotion lane. We are poets, we know it. Nath, how was your weekend without Wrexham? I suppose, like the glory days, the best way to avoid disappointment was by not playing at all, and it worked out pretty well for us in the end.
Yeah, it did. I was trying to plan my weekend around, obviously, Forest Green. I wasn't able to make it. I was channeling my inner Jacob Mendy, practicing my Spanish, mi español, and I was at a very lovely Christmas lunch with my Spanish tutor and other students, and I was very much getting ready, rushing to make sure that I was back for Forest Green. And then as I was on the way there, rain, go away, come back another day. Unfortunately, the game was off. Pitch was flooded. Phil Parkinson and Steve Parkin had a look. They had no complaints with it in the end. You know, they've spoken since and had no complaints. So Wrexham weekend free. And all it does, inevitably, as Rob McElhenney himself pointed out, you just end up looking at the table, looking at everyone else, and it couldn't, Rich, have gone much better for Wrexham.
No, it was a pretty good one. There's always that interesting debate, isn't there? I think, would you rather have games in hand or points on the board? Because I suppose when you look at the table, you can almost get carried away and be like, well, we've got 3 points from that game that we didn't play. But, we could also drop points. So it means there'll be a backlog sometime in the season. Obviously, we've got MK Dons on a Tuesday night because of the FA Cup involvement. We'll now have Forest Green away on a Tuesday night because of the postponement. 2 pretty lengthy trips there. The players certainly maybe want to do overnighters for them. I know last season there was this habit of trying to fly to as many games as possible because it gave the team that edge, really, and they want to take advantage of it. There would be an irony about flying down to Eco Club Forest Green, wouldn't there? But yeah, we shall see what happens in that regard. Like I said, Wrexham second in the table right now, 37 points, 6 points off the top with a game in hand. Worth noting as well that Wrexham are level with Barrow, who are in a similar position, and below us, Crewe are a point below us, have a game in hand, and Mansfield are a point below us, have 2 games in hand on the rest of the pack as well. So there's a lot of permutations. I do think, it was a very good weekend. Let's not gloss over that. But I do think, that sometimes you can just take for granted that a game less played means that we've got a guaranteed 3 points coming up somewhere. It doesn't always work like that. And you never know the quirk of the league. Forest Green could be an informed team by the time we've got to play them.
I mean, who knows? I mean, we had the preview, didn't we, last week that Troy Deeney would have been banged up for it. They were looking for a response.
Saves a bit of work later in the season, doesn't it?
Well, look, we've got our man in the know now with Forest Green, so we can get him back on. I mean, look, consolation for the players. They got their Christmas night out in London. I think they ended up, some of them went to Winter Wonderland. I saw posts on Instagram. So I'm sure they had a good weekend, a nice weekend off to recharge. And yeah, I am, Rich, a self-confessed points on the board man. Admittedly, I'd rather just get those points on the board rather than have games to play. But it was taken out of Wrexham's hands. And also, with the injuries we've got, imagine forcing the game to go ahead or pressuring the ref to get it on. I'm sure Forest Green were desperate to get it on, given it was going to be their record crowd of the season. Now, you'd obviously imagine that it won't be that on a Tuesday night, and who knows where they'll be by the time it's played. If it's played in February, March, April, they could be cut adrift, or they might just be in no man's land by that point. So you'd imagine that's frustrating on their part, but we've got so many injuries, which imagine if we'd have had a serious injury and how frustrated we would have been then that we wouldn't have taken more care and had a bit more TLC on the group. So I've taken it for what it is. I've got no issue with the postponement. I have got issue with the fact it was at 11:30. I mean, surely that pitch could have been checked. I know the referee supposedly was coming from quite far away and couldn't have got there any earlier. That was definitely the intimation. But I don't know. It's in the past. We move on. We don't play Forest Green. We've got Colchester this weekend. And we'll soon find out if that rest has done us the world of good, Rich, or has left us a little bit cold in the winter.
Interesting as well. I know you mentioned there about the timing of the postponement. It is one of those where it's lose-lose almost. If you postpone it the day before, was that like what we had with Chesterfield with the frozen pitch? You get pelters because it's like, well, why didn't you give it as much time as possible? Why did you not try give as much guidance as you could, or you leave it late in the best hope of getting the game on, and then you have to, upset people who are already on their way down there. So it's a really difficult one, isn't it? And like I said, I think you're always in a lose-lose. Again, ideally, it would have been better if the call had come earlier in the day. But as we took to social media, it did get us thinking about memorable postponements, usually obviously for the wrong reasons. I do remember when I was working on the Wrexham media team, I remember them getting up so early to do Torquay away. Was that 2016 or so, 2015?
Right.
And it got postponed in like an hour or two before kickoff. And anyone who did Torquay away last season will know what a bloody grueling journey that is. And that's not even to go watch champions in action. That was to go watch us slog it out in, was it like an FA Cup qualifying round or FA Trophy or something? And oh my God, it was...
Rich, before I give my example, I remember going for work purposes. I had to do a match at Stockport, and I got there. I was about to go through the turnstile at Edgeley Park, and as I got to the turnstile, the steward said to me, "It's off, mate." Turn back around, and I had to head home. So that was a long old trip. But for me, and I'm sure this gets a mention in our social media post about famous or memorable postponements, Aldershot a season or two ago when the brushes were out on the pitch.
Didn't we get an injury in that game? I swear someone went off injured, although someone got a knock in that match. And
all I remember is just Aaron Hayden and Christine Dibble with squeegees and Paul Mullen with a towel. Yeah, absolutely football heritage, that one. But we did take to social media, as Rich said. We posted on Rob Ryan Red. Thank you so much for all the support on that. Rich staggeringly was somehow near 38,000 followers, which is absolutely about 37,500 more than we probably deserve. But thank you so much for all the people that keep spreading the word and people that are finding us through friends of friends. It's very much appreciated. We had a couple of nice messages, Rich, in recent weeks of people who've just discovered the podcast. So we really hope you like it and you keep listening. But as for the post we put, today's postponement got us thinking, what are your most memorable postponement horror stories? Now, Bryn Law, who people will know from Radio Wales, does the commentaries and various other broadcasting outlets. He put, Rich, for his, he put Nottingham Forest away in the FA Cup in 1982. Neighbour drove us, heater up, he'd accelerate, decelerate. It's a windy road journey. I used to get car sick anyway. It felt like death. Threw up multiple times en route. I arrived at the city ground and a copper taps on the window. It's off. Try again tomorrow. Not ideal, is it? Windy road back. Rich Watkins tried to top that. Rich Watkins, a fat ball carnivore and Mice Gwyn fame. He put Barry Town away in the Welsh Premier Cup. I'm old now, but I reckon it was 30 minutes before the game was due to kick off. It was postponed, and that was a long old way to go on a Tuesday night. Honourable mentions for Bournemouth and Grimsby back in the day. Annette has gone with Aldershot and the towel fiasco. Gareth has put, back in 2003, I went to Boston away. I got all the way up there, and as we got to the ground, we heard on the radio it was off. We still went to the ground, and they let us in, and I had a kickabout on a boggy pitch, which is absolutely superb. I'll give you one more then. Anthony Humphreys has put, not Forest away again in the FA Cup. Let's find a different one. Oh, here's one then. Just Evans has put Shrewsbury at home, early 2000s. We, the Holywell Reds, sponsored the game, and we were just tucking into the pre-match dinner, and we're about 10 pints deep, and then they announced the game was off. Didn't believe them. So I looked through the director's box, and it was a lake. So there you go.
I like that Spirit of 78 had numerous ones to throw forward, which is always a sign, which is good. Cardiff away, 1988. Jacko driving the bin line transit van, got as far as Leominster when news came through the game was off. Club call confirmation on that one. Also followed it up. Halifax away in the late 80s. Called off just after 2 p.m. Quick dash to watch Bradford versus Oxford in the FA Cup. Dean Saunders was playing for Oxford. They lost 4-2. Jacko once again was driving the minibus that day. Andy Ball and Andy Morell both gave a shout out to Braintree away. I think Andy Ball said he'd been on the bus for 9 hours when they found out that the game was getting kicked off, getting postponed. Sorry, and there are so many examples here. I do urge you to go and check out the thread because
Rich, let me give you one more before people are going to go and flock to this thread because it is honestly it's brilliant. I've some stories I've never heard before, but one from Ian Williams and also shout out to Jonathan Crew. Both mentioned the West Ham Cup game. Ian Williams put West Ham away in the FA Cup in midweek. I got to a pub in Leicester Square only to get told it's off. had to drive home in thick fog. And Jonathan's version was West Ham for the replay. There were no smartphones back then. And I overheard a Hammers fan telling his mate it was off due to fog. I was one tube stop away, which is a long old way from Wrexham. So that was a brilliant thread. I loved all the responses. Thanks to everyone who replied to that. Halifax, Northampton, Nottingham, Bournemouth. There's so many games. Do check it out. But yeah, Rich, my cousin was there. He was on the way to Forest Green. He texted me saying, "What is there to do in Nailsworth?" So that was his Saturday.
Not much,
as the game.
and that includes the football ground. I mean, yeah, I've been there once before, and I watched Wrexham hold on for a 0-0 draw with 9 men. I think Connor Jennings and Sean Newton both got sent off that day. It was quite a nice sunny one. We had to commentate from the stand because there was no press box at the time, and
Right.
we got abused by the Forest Green press officer who called us the worst swear word imaginable. Let's put it that way. What a lovely story.
Nice and
so yeah,
professional.
congratulations to your relegation to the National League. I will be toasting that if that happens.
We
we're
will
not bitter
see
on this podcast. We're not bitter.
But Rich,
at all.
This is a good point to link, and we're going to do a more in-depth mailbag later in the podcast. But this one from Dennis, who is, you'll be glad to know, Rich, in the 0.1% of fans that have listened to us this year. He's listened to 8,543 minutes of us on Spotify, which is absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for the support,
How many
Dennis.
minutes did you say, sorry?
8,543 minutes this year he's listened to us, which is remarkable.
That equates... I mean, how much does that equate to? A minute? Sorry, yeah.
Are you all right? You got confused with the maths. He's listened to us a lot.
I was just trying to
basically
work out how many days of his life he'd spent listening to the podcast.
I mean, while I read this out, you can try and figure out 8,543 into days. But it's 8,543 minutes. He has written, my question for you both, I'll refer to both of us on this, Rich. He puts, I love hearing all your road warrior stories. Again, we've just read out a load there from different people. And always about away games, how difficult some places are to get to, stuff you run into along the way, and how many stadiums we reckon we've been to over the years. When you think of away days, and I love away days, I say to people in work that, the racecourse is hallowed turf and it is amazing to go back there. But away days is something special. How many days have you got there? 5? You
just
put it up on the
shy
screen.
of 6 days listening to us non-stop.
6 days. Congratulations, Dennis. That is 6 days
awful.
you will never get back. Away days then, Rich. Some of my favourites. I mean, obviously in recent times we've mentioned Coventry almost every podcast. Wealdstone, when the stand collapsed, I had an amazing Thai curry on the way home and got very, very drunk on the tube home. But I've got loads. I remember when I was a mascot at Stockport County for Wrexham. And I just remember being in the dressing room and kind of being away from home. I remember Rich Watkin had ran to get me the kit the night before because I didn't have a little full kit. And I remember being in a changing room. It was like Brian Carey and Dennis Lawrence and Ben Foster and Juan Ugarte and Darren Ferguson, people like that. And the stench of deep heat was overwhelming me as a child. It was cooking me alive, basically. But yeah, what are your kind of, I don't know, away day stories? I know you obviously did plenty as the media team, but have you ever had any away day fiascos? You had one recently at Mansfield when a friend of the pod had to help you get a ticket.
Oh, that was hell, yeah. That was hell. That was Manchester Reds. That was us trying to leave Manchester. So the traffic was... We'd agreed to meet like sort of north of Manchester to then get a lift to Mansfield, and that proved to maybe even be our downfall because it's one of those where it took me 45 minutes to drive like 2 miles just to get to the meeting point. And when you get in the car, when we got in the car, the ETA for Mansfield was about 20 past 8. Bear in mind, it's a 7:45 kickoff. So you think, well, even if we leave now, we will miss the first half potentially. But credit to Matt from the Manchester Reds. The laws that he must have pushed to the limits. We got there at least second the game kicked off. We were there. But yeah, I mean, traveling with I've said before. I think if you're local to a supporters group, then you're going to have some tales to tell. And the Manchester Reds have a plethora of those. And I just bet every single group does. There's been so many stories, lots of stories I'm not even sure I should be saying on the podcast, really, because I'm just not sure if they are for the public sort of sphere yet.
Public consumption.
Yeah, maybe I'll get a list of stories we can tell for a future episode. But I think that is just part of it for me. And I think, again, that's why North American fans love Wrexham so much, is because away day culture is just not really a thing in North American sports due to the distances you travel. You get them for local games. But, if you support a MLS team or an NFL team, you can't be going to away days every single week. There's just not the same sort of subculture of it all, really. And I think most football fans, being at the Kairos, that's where the special moments, that feels at home. But an away day, you just cannot beat that thrill of going somewhere new, hopefully winning, just having a good day out with your mates. And they're just the most memorable games. There's very few away days that you completely forget, but there's a lot of home games that you do that just mean nothing to you, really. But there is just something about going on the road for me, and that excitement when you sort of get to that age and you can first start going to these away matches. It's brilliant. And again, the quirk of football fans and sports fans in general, most of my geography knowledge comes from away days or checking where that is on the map. There's places, there are places that no one should know where it is on the map. But from following Wrexham, we know it. I was thinking today about when we lost to Stamford in the FA Cup. And if you told me to point out where Stamford was on a map, I wouldn't be able to tell you that it's about 6-7 miles or whatever outside of Peterborough. But I know, because I was there when Sean Harad scored to make it 1-1, and I was there when they did us 3-2 in the replay, the race course. That is just the beauty of following a team home and away for me.
Rich, look, there's Notts County this season, I think, will live long in the memory as an away day. Just everything about it was just as close to quintessentially perfect away day as you can get. Easy run to get to for a lot of people. Great atmosphere. This rivalry that's built up between the two teams. We won, amazing. But yeah, some of the ones I remember going to Eastleigh, and I was walking Southampton Airport Parkway. If you get the train down, I was walking like I didn't have any data left on my phone, so I couldn't figure out where I was going. There wasn't a Wrexham fan in sight by the time I got there. I got there so early, ambling around what looked like some kind of housing estate. Anyway, I finally made it. We were side on, and we drew 1-1. And Graham Stack was doing a gesture I'm not going to repeat on this video, but was doing a gesture that was not super well received, as you can imagine, as he ran down the tunnel to Wrexham. So there's been some horror shows. I always say Ebbsfleet in the rain was at the Cufflink Stadium was an absolute grueler. Kidderminster away, Woking away, when I genuinely I don't think I've ever been as cold as I was sat up behind the goal in the stand at Woking.
For Wrexham fans of a certain era, and it's not that old at all in particular, they will remember so fondly Sean Newton's free kick at Kidderminster away. Agborough, was that a 3-1 win in what felt, I think it was the first few weeks of the season, and it felt like this was finally our year. Yeah, for me in recent years, the best away days have been Oldham and Halifax, I think. For Rich, the fact they were both in the Northwest, we won last second in both of those games through Paul Mullin, and it was just limbs.
Rich, you know what? Amazing, and I show people and they can't even believe the game ever went ahead. That picture away at Macclesfield, where they were like shoveling snow off the pitch. It is just covered. Like, someone sent me a picture. I think it might have been Daniel.
That'll be you in the temporary stand for Newport at home.
I'm desperate for that temporary stand. I know we're going to get onto that shortly, but I'm desperate to get a ticket for that. So if anyone has lucky enough and they have a spare, then please think of your podcasting friends. But yeah, away days, Dennis. Thanks for the question, and thanks for all the responses to the postponement story. It is part of the fun, part of the experience, and for every Ebbsfleet and for every Forest Green where you get sworn at, there's a Coventry, and there's a Wembley in there. There's a Grimsby when I got tripped up in a McDonald's. There's lots and lots and lots. And let us know your stories, robbrianred@gmail.com. If you're watching this segment on YouTube, go check out the full podcast episode, which will continue without you guys watching.
Sorry if you have been watching us on YouTube, because I've really not been paying attention to the camera.
It's fair enough. It's all right, mate. It's absolutely fine.
Because it's an audio podcast primarily, I will be in a little world of my own. So
I also feel like if we stare directly down the camera, is that intimidating? Is that...
Yeah, it's a bit uncomfortable.
I feel like it would make... You know what I mean? I feel like it would put me off. But anyway, if you're watching on YouTube, do go and check out the full podcast on Spotify. As always, keep sending us your Spotify raps. And without further ado, then, Rich, I guess onwards with the podcast.